What's up? It's Cherith, the Starry-Eyed Tarot Reader. Today I am doing a video response to the Curated Shelf called 22 Faves or Favorite Major Arcana. I did like a variation on this based off of Pure Red Velvet's video where I picked more than one favorite major arcana from each of my decks. I picked more than one for each of the 22 major arcana. I did something similar to this as like a learning tool. So I have this little book where I've taken a deck and I basically took each card, pasted it in there, put like a meaning, and then my ideal card. As you can see, I've whited it out. I actually need to redo this, but I did this for all 78 cards. And the reason I need to redo this is because some of the decks that I had at the time I no longer have, and I've changed since I first did this, so I want to kind of do an update of my ideal cards for each of this. So I've done something similar for myself for all of the cards, but it included, you know, all of the major arcana. So this is kind of an update for me for that, and also a video response to the Curated Shelf and Pure Red Velvet. So let's get started. The first one is the Fool, and for that I have two cards: the Tarot of the Divine and the Lubanko Tarot. Oh, that's cool. So for me, these are really my ideal Fool cards because of the expression in both of them. It's really an expression of like hope and like a leap of faith type of feeling for these cards in this particular instance. And for me, that really encapsulates the Fool card, the essence of the Fool card. It really is a leap of faith. It's a looking forward. It's a hopefulness. It's a new journey and an unknown. So that's the Fool. The second one is the Magician. And for this, I have three cards. So the first one is the Smith-Waite Centennial, and then in the True Black Tarot, and then the Crow Tarot. So for me, I really like the traditional Magician card, the symbolism of that, and the way that that's structured with the drawing power down and having all of the symbols of the tarot, you know, the cup, the pentacles, the swords, and the wands, along with the roses and the lilies. I really like everything about that. I like the Crow Tarot as well. It's one of my one of my faves because it's very similar to this, just with the crow, and it's the way that MJ Cullinane structured this with the way that the crow is flying up, but like the wings are like tilted like that. I think is a really cool way to make the magician energy fit the crow theme. I like the True Black Tarot because I feel it has the same, like, similar energy to these, with the way that the hands are, you know, directing the energy up and down. And I love the way that in the back there you've got that constellation. I just think it's absolutely beautiful. So those would be my ideal Magician cards. And next is the High Priestess. This one was difficult for me because the High Priestess tends to be my favorite. It's one of the major arcana cards that I connect with the most. It tends to be one of those cards that can make or break a deck for me. So for this one, I have four, and it's the Light Seers Tarot, the Lost Hollow Tarot, the Sasuraibito Tarot, and the Witches Tarot. So I like the Witches Tarot because it's very Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's kind of an updated version of it. I also really like the way that it's open on the bottom here to like the galaxy. I think that's really cool. And it's got all the symbolism of the traditional Rider-Waite High Priestess as well. I really like the Sasuraibito one for similar reasons. It's obviously not Rider-Waite, but the way that Stasia Barrington structured this with the owl and the crown of thorns and the the feet in the water, I think is really, really interesting way to interpret the High Priestess card. The Lost Hollow Tarot, I just really love everything about this. It's so weird and intense and different, but it's so beautiful and I absolutely love it. And it still conveys that sense of like story, the like storyteller and the mystery of the High Priestess. And I like the Light Seers. The color and energy and movement in this card really draws me in. I like that you can kind of see like the eyes, but it's like the way that it's structured, because her eyes are closed, so it's kind of like the third eye type of vision. And I like the way that the energy moves up, and the way that Chris-Anne structured this part is really cool. So that's the High Priestess. Next is the Empress. And this one was surprisingly difficult for me as well. I really didn't think it would be. The Empress is not a card I'm typically drawn to. But in this case, I have 4 of them. So it's the Nicoletta-Ceccoli Mini, the Forest Enby, the Neon Moon, and the Gentle Tarot. Shift that all over a little bit so you guys can see all of them. So I picked the Neon Moon because, and I mentioned this in my deck collection video about this deck, this is what drew me to buy the deck in the first place. And I think that this is the most badass Empress that I have seen in any deck. I like that even though like it's not the typical, pregnant Empress, and there's no like kids or anything around, there's still a sense of nurturing with the tree in the background. But there's also a sense of like, I don't know, the kind of nurturing, like the mama bear energy. Like, I'm gonna take care of, my own, and I'm gonna kick your ass if you get in my way type of thing. I really think that conveys that. I like the Ceccoli Empress. And I also mentioned this in my deck collection video about this deck. But I like that because, it's the creepy crawlies. It's the little creatures that we tend to overlook. Like, they need to be taken care of too. And so I like the energy of this. Like, the Empress isn't just taking care of, the things that you see and you think of every day when you think of the Empress card. She's taking care of all of the forgotten little bugs and those little creatures as well. Ugh. I chose this one because this is a Forest Enby tarot, so it's non-binary, it's genderless, and I like that energy, especially for the creator card, or what this is renamed to, the creator card, the Empress card. To be able to think beyond just, it's a pregnant woman for the Empress card, I think is really important to do, Because the Empress card isn't just about, you know, family and children. It's about creating. It's about the creative energy that it takes to birth anything, really. And so I think I chose this for that reason. And then I picked this one from the Gentle Tarot, because this is one of the first cards I drew from the Gentle Tarot when I first got it. And I just had such a deep experience with it when I read the description in the book that I can't not think of this card when I think of the Empress card. So that is the Empress. Next is the Emperor. And for this one, I've only got two. The Light Seers Tarot and the Weaver Tarot Journeyer Edition. So I chose this one because, so the Weaver Tarot renames the cards to be genderless. And I really appreciate that, especially for the Emperor card. It can be a difficult card for a lot of people. It's very male energy. There's nothing wrong with male energy, but the way that the Emperor card has kind of been presented is very aggressive. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. So I like that this is renamed to something like the Anchor. You know, it reminds you that energy is not just about being aggressive, it's also about anchoring and stability. So that's why I chose this one. I chose the Light Seers because the energy of this card is very much similar to the energy of this card for me. It's not the aggressive male energy that I feel like you sometimes get with the Emperor card. It's more of like the stable foundational energy that you get with the Emperor card. So that's why I chose this one. All right. Next is the Hierophant. And for this, I have 3 cards. I have the 78 Tarot Astral, the Botanica Tarot, and the Beautiful Creatures Tarot. So I chose these ones because they are not your typical Hierophant card. Your typical Hierophant card is, you know, the Pope standing above everyone, that kind of energy, and that can be difficult, especially for someone who comes from a Christian background and has kind of separated from that. It can be a difficult card. So I chose these 3 because they don't really have that traditional Hierophant energy. I mean, it's space penguins. It's hilarious, and it makes me laugh every time. And it's this, you know, space penguin who's teaching the others how to traverse space. And I just think it's really cute. I chose the Botanica one because these are roses. And roses make me think of my grandmother who kept rose bushes outside of her house and was always out there working on them, you know, trimming them and watering them and taking care of them. And I think that's a really cool energy to have for the Hierophant card, because it's not just about, you know, standing up in front of everyone and telling them what to do. It's about, you know, the traditions and the training and the teaching, but it's also doing it in a non-confrontational way, I guess. It's about, you know, guiding someone along the path, like you do with a rose bush. You know, you don't force it to be what you want it to be. It's going to be a rose bush. So you trim it and you guide it along, and I think that's really cool to have for the Hierophant card. And I chose the Beautiful Creatures. I haven't worked with this deck yet. I'm actually going to be working with it, I think not this month. Probably next month. But I haven't worked with it yet, but I liked the way that this one, it still has some religious, like, overtones, but they're softened. There's a sense there of not lording over someone, but walking alongside them and you know, guiding their hand and learning with them type of thing. So that's why I chose this one. So that is the Hierophant card. Next is the Lovers. And this is another one that I didn't expect to have a hard time choosing my ideal or my favorite from all of my decks. The Lovers card's not one I typically connect with very much in my decks. But when I laid out all of my decks, I was like, oh, I like all of these Lovers cards. That's interesting. So I have 4 of them. The first one is the She-Ra Majors. There's the Forest Enby, the Lubanko. I'm just gonna shift this over because my next one's kind of a large card, and the Weaver. So I chose the Lubanko. This is a difficult one for a lot of people in this deck, but I like the way that Emily explains it in the guidebook, where, you know, there's a certain amount of danger with the Lovers card, and I think we often forget that sort of passion can be all-consuming. And so I really like how they portrayed that in this card. It's a very intense, in-your-face type of energy. I chose this one from the She-Ra Majors Only deck that I have, just because of the energy of this one is so soft. It's so sweet. If you've watched the show, you know this character. She's just the sweetest, and so I like the energy of this card. You know, it's not, for me, this speaks to not just a romantic love, but also like a familial love, and in some instances with this character's journey, a self-love. So that's why I chose this one. I chose the Forest Enby Lovers card specifically because it's non-binary. So it's genderless. There's no assumptions here. There's no, you can't tell. And so it's really open to interpretation of what type of lover's energy this has, depending on what you get from it. And I like that. I chose the Weaver Tarot for exactly the same reason. And this is one that, so I have a tendency when I'm working with decks and I draw cards, if I have a hard time interpreting it and I don't want to go to the book, like the guidebook right away, I'll picture in my mind like a card from another deck. If I can come up with, in my mind, another card that speaks to me about what that means, that's what I do. And this one is one that comes up a lot when I pull up the Lovers card. If I'm having a hard time, this is the card that'll pop into my head to be like, think about this sort of energy, think about this sort of imagery, and apply it to the card that you've pulled. So that's why I chose this one. Next is the Chariot, and I've got 3 cards for this one. So it's the Bad Bitches Tarot, the White Numen Tarot, and Tarot de las Mujeres Sabias. So I chose these ones. They all have very different energy. This is one of my all-time favorite Chariot cards. Like, that person just looks so relaxed, you know, they're sitting on the hood of their car, they're in charge, they got this, they know where they're going, they know what they're doing, and I love that. I chose this one. For some reason, looking at this card makes me think of the TV show Adventure Time. With there's a wizard that shows up in that show and has a whole journey, and this makes me think of him. So when I apply that to this card, it's very much like, hey, you know, you're going on this journey, be careful who you cross. type of thing, and so that makes me think of that. I chose this one because I just like that energy. It's being like the master of the elements and driving that forward. I think that's really cool. So that's the Chariot. Next is Strength. So I kept to the traditional Rider-Waite numbering, where Strength comes before Justice. So for Strength, I have 3 cards. I have the Ostara Tarot, Santa Muerte Tarot, and the Outsider Tarot. So I chose this one, the Santa Muerte Tarot, because I like that sense of the I'm gonna forget what it's called. The Mexican wrestling with the masks. Oh, I forgot what it's called. Anyway, but I like that energy of like that sort of masked person wrestling the dragon. Because sometimes Strength is about wrestling the dragon and, you know, conquering and moving forward. I chose the Ostara Tarot because, or the Strength card from the Ostara, because Strength is also about having that inner strength, that calmness to be able to conquer your dragons without wrestling them. So it's 2 different types of strength in these 2 cards for me. And then I chose the Outsider Tarot because I recently pulled this card from this deck, and reading the description of, you know, the nightmares and the you know, it has like the garlic under the bed, and it talks about what this red dragon symbolizes, and it talks about like the mind over matter type of thing and conquering your nightmares, and I thought that was really cool. So that's why I chose this one. Alright, next is the Hermit. And this is one of my favorite cards. One of my favorite Major Arcana cards. And I only have 3 because I'm very choosy about which type of hermit I like. So I've got the Crow, the Lubanko, and the Prisma Visions Mini. Kind of losing my daylight a little bit, so I may turn on my ring light like halfway through this. I'm gonna try to go without it. So the reason I chose the Lubanko Tarot is because I love the sense of space in this card. The retreating into inner space in this Hermit card is just absolutely beautiful. And I love that it's an older figure. It's just so entrancing to me. And so the reason I chose the Prisma Visions Mini, so the reason I chose the Prisma Visions rather than the Light Visions, which I tend to favor over the Prisma Visions, is because in the Prisma Visions, I love the coloring of this, from what I can see. To my eyes, this is absolutely stunning coloring, and I love that the Hermit is this tiny little figure on a bridge, and it's almost the last thing you see. You wouldn't even notice if it weren't for the moon right there. So I love that sense of like distance that this gives. And the reason I chose the Crow Tarot is because I love... this is a card that has, for me, almost a sense of isolation, which I know is what you're supposed to have with the Hermit card. But for this one, because there's, you know, snowfall and this crow's on a tree, it kind of feels like it's, you know, you're out in the cold. just figuring it out. You know, you just need to be out there in the cold and snow for a little bit to let all of that sink in and then move forward. And I like that in this card. So that is the Hermit. Next is the Wheel of Fortune. And for that one, I have 4 cards. It's going to be difficult because these are weird shaped cards. First one is the Dark Days Tarot, and then I have the Tarot of the Divine, the Orion's Tarot, and the Beautiful Creatures Tarot. Try to... Tried something, it didn't work. There we go. So the reason that I chose the Dark Days Tarot is because I like the traditional Rider-Waite symbolism of the Wheel of Fortune. I don't always like the traditional coloring of the Rider-Waite Wheel of Fortune. So I chose this one because it has that traditional symbolism of, you know, the bull, the lion, the eagle, the angel, the serpent, and I think that's a fox. But it has that traditional symbolism, but in black and white. And the way there's like a sparseness to it, because you don't have, you know, all the clouds and the background, the borders. And I love it. I absolutely love it. It's got the traditional symbolism, but not that weird yellow coloring that you get. So that's why I chose that one. I chose the Tarot of the Divine Wheel of Fortune because this is one of the mythologies that I actually was somewhat familiar with before I got this deck. This is Anansi, the Trickster, and I think that's perfect for the Wheel of Fortune. Because, you know, fortunes change, and there's sometimes a bit of, you know, trickery involved with that. And so I like that energy here. I chose the Beautiful Creatures Wheel of Fortune because I play Dungeons and Dragons, and the fact that this is a D20, a 20-sided dice for the Wheel of Fortune, it's just like absolutely perfect. Because if you've ever played D&D, you know all it takes is one roll of the dice to make or break something that you're doing and planned. Literally just had an experience like that with my D&D game just last night, where it was one roll of the dice and it made what I was doing work perfectly. And if it had gone the other way, it would have absolutely broken me. So all it takes is one roll of the dice. And I think that's absolutely perfect for a Wheel of Fortune card. And then I chose the Orion's Tarot because I love the energy of this with the scarab beetle. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. And it really speaks to me. So yeah, that's the Wheel of Fortune. Next is Justice. And for this one, I only have 2 cards. It's the Shadowscapes Tarot and 8 Coins Tattoo Tarot. So I chose 8 Coins Tattoo Tarot because it has a lot of the traditional symbolism of the Rider-Waite, but in the way that Lana Zellner illustrated this with the, you know, the bold lines of like tattooing, I think is just absolutely beautiful, and I love it for that. I chose the Shadowscapes Tarot because the way that this is illustrated, everything is balanced. The wings are, you know, black and white, one's pointed up, one's pointed down. You still got the sense of you know, blind justice. You got the scales. It's just absolutely perfect. So that is Justice. Next is the Hanged Man. And for that one I have 3 cards. So So the first one is the Light Visions. And then I've got the She-Ra Majors and the Weaver Tarot. I hope you can see that. So we'll start with this one. I chose this one because I talked about this in my deck collection video on this. I don't know if I have it up yet. I'll probably have it up before this. But I love this take on the Hanged Man. So it's this person floating in water, absolutely still, surrounded by piranhas. And it's such a non-traditional Hanged Man that it really draws me in. I absolutely love that sense of stillness and waiting and like don't make sudden movements type of thing. And just being patient. And I just absolutely love that. I chose the She-Ra one because one, well, Entrapta is my favorite character on the show. And given her personality, having her for the Hanged Man I think is brilliant, because all it takes is a change in perspective and sometimes considering other people's perspectives as well to move forward. And so I think it's absolutely brilliant having her in this card. And I chose the Weaver Tarot because, again, this is one of those that this comes to my mind almost the same amount this one does when I think of the Hanged Man. I absolutely love just the rose, just holding it upside down, just that sense of suspension. It's so simple and so beautiful. It's also genderless, so it's the Hanged One instead of the Hanged Man, which I appreciate. Alright, next is Death. This is one of those that, when I first started learning tarot, it was a very interesting card. I never felt a sense of fear around this card. I know a lot of people, when they don't know tarot or when they're first learning tarot, tend to have a sense of fear around this card. I don't. I never really have. I love the Death card. It's always interesting to me when it comes up in a reading, especially, you know, depending on what's surrounding it. So for this one, I have 4 cards. I have the White Numen, the Wayward Dark, the Santa Muerte, and the True Black. So we'll start with the Santa Muerte. The reason I chose this one is because the sense of ending but also beginning, the reminder that death isn't always the end, that there's also a beginning, is really cool the way this is depicted. And it's just absolutely beautiful. The detail on this is just stunning. So that's why I chose that one. I chose the White Numen. This is not a deck I've worked with a lot. I actually will be working with it this month. But I love the way that this is illustrated. It borrows from the traditional Rider-Waite with the person on horseback with the flag and the white flower. But there's just something about the fact that this person is in the middle of the desert. And it's just them and the horse. And they're staring right at you. And there's just something about that that really speaks to me. And the reason I chose the Wayward Dark Tarot is because the intensity of this Death card, the skeletal figure who's not even a complete figure, it just kind of trails off, is absolutely beautiful to me. I love everything about this card. And the reason I chose the True Black Tarot, sorry, I'm trying to get it so you can see the background there, is because of what it says in the guidebook about this and the way that Arthur Wang explains what's going on in the background here. And believe in this, if I'm remembering correctly, it's another thing like the Santa Muerte. There's a sense of ending, but also beginning, and I absolutely love that. It's just so beautifully illustrated. So that is the Death card. Next is Temperance. And for this, I only have 2 cards, Tarot of the Divine and Neon Moon. So I talked about this in my deck collection video about this deck, but I absolutely love the way Pixel Occult illustrates angelic figures, because there is a sense of terror in them, and I believe that's the way it should be. But I just absolutely love the way this is illustrated. It's intense, and I love it. And then I chose the Tarot of the Divine because of who this figure is. I cannot remember their name. I'll put it up on the screen, probably like right over here somewhere if I can. I'll look it up and I'll put it up on the screen over here. But there's such a sense of balance in this card, in this figure. You know, everything's in proportion, everything is perfectly balanced, and it's absolutely beautiful. So that's why I chose this one. Next is the Devil card. And this is another one of those ones coming from a Christian background that I struggle with sometimes. So the cards I chose are, for me, ones that I've either had an experience with, or that when I look at them, I can connect them to things I know, either from my Christian background or from being a weird nerd who reads a lot of mythology and other things like that. So the ones I have are the Star Spinner, the Lubanko, and the Crow Tarot. Shift him around a little bit. Ah. So the reason I chose the Lubanko is because when I look at this card, I'm reminded of Persephone and Hades and that story. And so for me, this connects to the devil energy in a different way, and I really like that. I love this card. And then I chose the Star Spinner because when I look at this card, it, for me, has very much of that traditional Christian imagery of the devil. And I can work with that. So that's why I chose this one. And I chose the Crow Tarot because when I was working with this one in May, I pulled this card and there was a line in the guidebook about, oh, I wish I could remember it. I'll look it up. Maybe I'll put it in as like a postscript or something. But that line, like, I pulled that card, I read that in the guidebook, I put it down, I put the card down, and I was like, there's no need to call me out like that. But thank you, I think. So now, it's one of those things, like, once I have an experience with a card, I tend to think of that card when I think of my ideal card, whatever it is. So now this is what's going to pop up in my head when I think of the Devil card in tarot. Next is the Tower. And for this one, I have 3 cards. So I have the Tarot at the End of the Rainbow, the Wayward Dark, and the Muse Tarot. So we'll start with the Tarot at the End of the Rainbow. I chose this one. Well, I chose this one because it has some of that traditional imagery, but in like a new way. I like that there's like a sense of distance, so you can see the destruction, but you're not like in the destruction. And you can see even with how, you know, this tower is crumbling, there's still a foundation there. So I really like that. I chose the Wayward.Dark. So this is a Thoth-based deck. So the Tower is renamed to War. And this is one of those ones, again, I love everything about this. The face, the eyes, the whatever these are coming from that, this weird snake figure over here, the bird, the people falling down here. It's just like in your face. It's no holds barred on this, and I love it. And I chose the Muse Tarot for the Tower card because of the way that this is depicted, and the fact that it's connected to this person's mind, and it's all this energy coming out, and so there's this sense of, sometimes the destruction, it's not what you think it is. Not to say it's all in your head, but sometimes, you can make it worse in your head than it actually is. And I think this really depicts that energy, and it's really cool. So that's the Tower. Next is the Star card. So the Star card was really hard for me because this is the card of Aquarius. That's my sun sign. I'm an Aquarius. So choosing my favorite Star card was really hard. The Star card is also one of those cards, like the High Priestess card, that can make or break a deck for me. I have a tendency to, when I'm looking at new decks, I go to the Star card, because if I like that, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna figure out a way to work with the deck if I like the Star card. So I have 4 cards for this one. It's really hard to narrow it down that much. The first one is the Nicoletta-Ceccoli Mini, and then the Star Spinner, the Sasuraibito, and the Light Visions. I'm gonna figure out how to put that. There we go. So I've talked about the Sasuraibito Star card in my deck collection video about this deck, but this is my all-time favorite. I love stars. I love galaxies and stargazing and learning about constellations and other galaxies. Like, it's just absolutely fascinating to me. So the fact that the Star card is an astronaut floating in space with this, whatever this is, galaxy, nebula in the background, is just perfect. In my mind, there will never be another more perfect Star card than this card. But I do have some other favorites. I like the Nicoletta-Ceccoli Star card because there's just such a sense of peace here. And it's another one that's, it's this kind of angelic figure floating out in the galaxy. Just absolutely beautiful. I chose the Star Spinner Tarot because for me on this one, there's just a real sense of peace. There's a sense of rest. There's a sense of stillness and harmony. And I love it. I chose the Light Visions because in this one, there's almost a sense of ecstasy within the stillness. And I love that so much. And even though this is sepia toned, there's just such a sense of like movement and expression and emotion, and it's beautiful. So that's the Star card. Next is the Moon. So for this one, I have 3 cards. Got the Santa Muerte Tarot, the Light Seers Tarot, and the True Black Tarot. Move that over here. It'll be easier to see. So I chose the True Black Tarot because this was one of the cards I pulled when I was working with this deck in the month of May. And I absolutely loved the description. It it talks about in the guidebook the fact that the hand reaching through the bowl is actually this hand here. And I just thought that was so cool. Like, not everything is what it seems type of energy for the moon card. I chose this one for pretty much the same reason as I had an experience with this card. I pulled it once when I was working with the Light Seer's Tarot, and reading the description in the book literally made me cry. So now when I think of the moon card, I think of this card. And I chose the Santa Muerte Tarot because the way that this is illustrated with this figure here, and you can see, you know, she's got, I mean, she's fully realized person. But then she's looking in the reflection, and in the reflection it's a skeleton. So it's a sense of like looking inside and like what is inside, what's underneath type of thing. I think that's really cool. So that's why I chose that one. Next is the Sun card. And for this one I've got 3 cards as well. I've got the Star Spinner, Fantastic Menagerie, and 78 Tarot Astral. So we'll start with this one. I chose this one because the first time that I saw this card, I think it's the Beatles song. I don't know, there's a line where it's like, "Here comes the sun." I'm not gonna try to sing because I can't sing, but it's that song. There's just such a sense of joy with this that every time I see this card, that song pops into my head and I just have to smile. There's such a sense of light and hopefulness with this Sun card. I absolutely love it. And then I chose the Star Spinner Tarot for much of the same reason. There's just something about looking at this card, I get a sense of hope and joy, and yeah, I lost my words, sorry. And then I chose the Fantastic Menagerie because looking at this little rooster makes me think of the rooster from Disney's Robin Hood. And I'll start singing Oodalali. Oodalali, golly, what a day. And that just makes me smile. So that's why I chose that one. And next is the Judgment card. And for this one I have 3 cards. So I have the Dark Days, the Lost Hollow, and the Lubanko again. 3 very different Judgment cards. These are somewhat similar, but this one's definitely a softer Judgment card. And I love the way that that's illustrated with the angel, the angelic figure. It's very soft and gentle. Softer and gentler than the other ones I've chosen. So that's why I chose that one. I chose this one because, gosh, the sense of movement in that and the intensity is really interesting to me. I chose this one because, again, that's a terrifying angelic figure. And the way that that's illustrated with that many-eyed figure coming over, well, I just love it. So that's why I chose this one. And then last is the World card. And I have 4 cards for this one. So first is the Fae and Ferns, Tarot of the Divine, the Outsider Tarot, I'm gonna move this over, and the 78 Tarot Astral. So we'll start with the Outsider Tarot, and I also talk about this in my deck collection video. If it's up by this point, you'll hear me talk about it twice. I love this world card because of its simplicity. It's just a circle on a white background with slight shadow. There's a sense of finality, a sense of completeness, and I love it. It's perfect for a world card. I chose Fae and Fern's tarot. Well, first it's renamed to the Universe in this deck. And that's part of why I chose it, because of the way that this is illustrated with this cat and all the planets around it. I love that there's a sense of completeness, but also like beginning the next stage of the journey. You know, you finished the first part of the journey, now we're moving on and exploring further, and I love that. I chose the Tarot of the Divine because I love this picture. And if you read in the Beneath the Moon guidebook that you can get, this story is absolutely beautiful, and it's just there's a sense of peace for me with this world card. And then I chose 78 Tarot Astral because everything about this is amazing to me. The burst of color, sense of movement and energy, but also finality, and it's so cool. So yeah, that is my entirely too long video about my 22 Major Arcana favorites. So I was cleaning up and realized I actually had like one more thing I wanted to say at the end of this video. I keep forgetting to do like wrap up at the end of my videos. I'll get there. I don't want to say this was really fun to like look through all of my decks and see which of the Major Arcana spoke to me. I did look at all of my decks. I know it probably doesn't seem like it because I was pretty heavily in favor of a few of them. I was actually really surprised by some of the ones that I was drawn to that I chose for this. It was really interesting to see how it all played out, but it was a lot of fun. Some of them I knew because some of the ones I picked were ones I had picked the last time that I did this like 2 years ago, and that didn't change, which was interesting to me. Some of the others definitely changed, like completely different cards that I chose or different decks that I chose. So it was really, really interesting to see the difference in what I chose from 2 years ago when I did this for myself versus now, and the decks that I've gone through, because I have gotten rid of some and gotten some new ones in, so it was interesting to see how that played into it. That was it. Now we can actually end the video. I was cleaning up and realized I almost forgot my addendum. I said I was going to pull out the guidebook for the Crow Tarot and talk about the description of the Devil card that made me get temporarily mad at my deck. So the part that really jumped out to me was this one here, this last line. This card points out that the chains that have bound you may be of your own creation. And it talks about it may also indicate a fear of change. That really hit me because I don't do good with change. I do very, very poorly with change, as a matter of fact. So pulling that, and I have a lot of change going on with like my work right now. So pulling that and reading that, I was just like, thanks, I think. It was one of those moments for me. So I wanted to add that on. It'll probably be like a little insert into the video, and then you finish watching the video. All right, that was all. Bye. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and bye till next time.